The tow truck's engine rumbled as its winch tightened around my car's front wheels. My heart dropped. I had barely stepped outside when I saw the scene unfolding. My car, my diplomatic vehicle, being lifted off the pavement by a tow truck. And standing there, arms crossed, a smug smirk on her face, was Karen, the self-appointed HOA dictator. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. "What do you think you're doing?" I called out, keeping my voice steady. The tow truck driver barely spared me a glance, but Karen turned with all the theatrics of a villain in a bad soap opera. Finally, she huffed, as if she had been waiting for this moment all her life. "You can't just park wherever you want. HOA rules apply to everyone." I felt my pulse pick up, but not in the way she expected. See, I had already warned her about this. My car wasn't just any vehicle. It had diplomatic plates, and by international law, it could not be towed. Moving it without proper authorization would be a serious violation, one that could cause a legal nightmare far beyond anything this HOA had ever dealt with. But Karen wasn't backing down. The driver hesitated, now eyeing my car more closely, and I saw his brow furrow as he noticed the plates. Karen, however, was already on her power trip, stepping closer with that condescending little laugh. "Don't think you're special just because you have fancy plates. HOA rules are HOA rules." She waved a piece of paper in my face. "And according to Section 5.2 of the Community Parking Policy, this vehicle is in violation and is being towed at your expense." I exhaled through my nose. This was ridiculous. My car was legally exempt from local towing ordinances. The fact that she was even trying this meant one of two things. Either she truly didn't understand the law, or, more likely, she thought she could override it. The tow truck driver, now clearly uneasy, looked between me and Karen. "Ah, ma'am," he muttered, shifting from foot to foot. "These plates. This is government property. We might want to." Karen didn't let him finish. "I don't care what the plates say. This is a private community, and our rules are final." At that moment, I realized she wasn't just ignorant. She was doubling down, and that meant this was about to get a whole lot worse for her. I pulled my phone from my pocket. "All right," I said, opening my contacts. "If you insist, I'll just let the embassy know that one of their vehicles is being illegally towed." The color drained from the tow truck driver's face. Karen, however, laughed. Actually laughed. "Go ahead," she mocked. "Call whoever you want. I'm just following the rules, and there's nothing you can do about it." "Oh, Karen, if only you knew." As I pressed the call button, the sound of a car approaching made Karen glance over her shoulder. A black SUV pulled up, stopping abruptly as a suited figure stepped out. Karen scoffed. "Oh, what now? Is this supposed to scare me?" she sneered. The man shut the door and strode toward us, his posture straight, his expression unreadable. He was part of my embassy's security team, someone I had already called the moment I saw my car being hooked up. Without acknowledging Karen, he walked right up to the tow truck driver and pulled out an ID badge. "Sir," he said in a level tone, "if you continue with this tow, you will be violating federal law. I suggest you unhook this vehicle immediately." The driver looked like he was about to have a heart attack. Oh, yeah, of course," he stammered, hands moving to the controls. The winch stopped, the tension easing from my car's tires. But Karen wasn't done. "You can't do this," she shrieked, rounding on the security officer. "This is our neighborhood. We have rules, and no one, not even some government big shot, is above them." The officer barely glanced at her. "Ma'am, I suggest you take a step back." His voice was calm, but there was an underlying edge of authority, the kind that made it clear this was not a request. Karen bristled. I could practically see the battle happening in her head. She had spent years lording over this HOA, making residents bend to her will, and now, for the first time, she was being challenged by something she couldn't control. Her lips thinned. "I'm calling the HOA board," she snapped. "We'll see who has the real power here." Oh, this was going to be fun. I leaned against my car, watching as she stormed off, phone clutched in her white-knuckled grip. The tow truck driver wiped his forehead and muttered a prayer under his breath. "I'm so sorry," he said. I didn't know about the plates. I really don't want to get in trouble." The security officer cut him off. "Your company will be receiving a formal warning for failing to verify the legality of this tow." The driver looked like he wanted to crawl into a hole. And as for Karen, she was about to get a reality check she'd never forget. The moment Karen stormed off, phone clutched in a death grip, I knew she wasn't backing down. If anything, she was about to escalate things further, because that's what power-hungry people do when they realize they're losing control. I took a breath, watching as the tow truck driver frantically unhooked my car, clearly wanting nothing to do with this mess anymore. He avoided eye contact, muttering apologies under his breath. The embassy security officer stood beside me, arms crossed, his face unreadable. I could tell he wasn't worried. He had probably dealt with bigger egos than this before. Then, like clockwork, Karen came marching back, smug as ever, followed by an older man in business casual, someone I immediately recognized as Mr. Langley, the HOA president. He had a concerned look on his face, probably realizing that he was now involved in something way above the HOA's pay grade. Karen pointed at me dramatically. "There, that's the person who's been ignoring our rules and causing trouble," she announced as if she had uncovered a criminal conspiracy. "I told them repeatedly that their car is in violation, and now they're trying to use some government nonsense to get away with it." Mr. Langley sighed, rubbing his temples like a man who desperately wished he had called in sick today. "All right, let's calm down," he said, raising his hands. "Can someone explain to me what exactly is going on?" Karen turned to him, already launching into a tirade. "This person, who I might add hasn't even been cooperative with the HOA before, keeps parking their car in violation of the neighborhood's rules. I called for it to be towed, like any good HOA board member would, and now suddenly it's a national emergency." She threw up her hands. "We're just trying to enforce the rules, Langley. This isn't complicated." I folded my arms, deciding to let her dig her own grave a little deeper before I spoke. The security officer, however, was done with the nonsense. He pulled out his ID again and held it up for Langley to see. "Sir," he said in a measured tone, "this vehicle is registered to the embassy. It carries diplomatic immunity, which means that under international law, it cannot be towed, impounded, or seized in any way. What your board member attempted to do here is not just a violation of that law, but it could potentially create legal consequences for your entire HOA." Langley's face visibly paled. His hands twitched at his sides, his lips parting as if he wanted to argue but had suddenly forgotten how words worked. Karen, however, doubled down. "Oh, please," she scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "HOA rules apply to everyone. This is a private community, and we have a right to enforce our regulations. This whole diplomatic excuse is just that, an excuse." Langley turned to her sharply. "Karen, do you understand what diplomatic immunity means?" he asked, his voice tense. "This isn't about community rules anymore. This is about federal and international law." Karen huffed. "So what? We're supposed to just let them do whatever they want? That's not fair. Everyone else follows the rules." I finally decided to speak. "Karen, let's say you somehow got my car towed anyway. Do you know what would have happened next?" I gestured toward the security officer. "This gentleman here would have filed a report with the State Department. The State Department would have contacted the embassy. And then, do you know what happens after that?" Karen didn't answer, but her arms were still crossed in defiance. I smiled. "Your HOA would be slapped with legal repercussions that would make your head spin. You'd be dealing with lawsuits, investigations, and fines. Not to mention, you personally could be charged with interfering with a foreign government's property." I tilted my head. "Still think the HOA rules apply to everyone?" Langley let out a deep, exhausted sigh, his hand rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Karen," he said, his tone now firm, "you overstepped. Badly. You should have looked into the legalities before trying to have the car towed." Karen's face twisted into a scowl. "So what? We just let it slide just because they have special plates? That's ridiculous." Langley turned to me. "Listen, I don't want any trouble with the embassy. I'm willing to drop this and move on. We'll make sure the HOA doesn't interfere with your vehicle again." I could tell he was trying to do damage control, but Karen, she was still seething. She suddenly turned to the tow truck driver, who had been standing awkwardly nearby, trying to blend into the pavement. "Why aren't you towing it?" she snapped. "I gave you an order." The driver actually took a step back, shaking his head. "Ma'am, I can't. I legally can't." He looked at the security officer for help, clearly realizing that Karen wasn't going to take no for an answer. The security officer stepped forward, his voice now carrying a sharp authority. "Ma'am, if you continue attempting to have this vehicle towed despite being informed of the legal ramifications, we will be forced to escalate this matter with law enforcement." For the first time since this all started, I saw a flicker of doubt cross Karen's face. She wasn't used to being challenged, but her pride wouldn't let her admit defeat. "This is absurd," she muttered, her voice quieter now, but still dripping with venom. "This is how rules get broken. When some people get special treatment, it ruins it for everyone else." Langley exhaled through his nose. Karen, drop it. His voice was now borderline threatening. I mean it. The tow truck driver, finally seeing an exit strategy, climbed back into his truck and started the engine. He gave me an apologetic look before putting the truck into reverse, the hydraulic arm lowering back into its resting position. Karen stood there, fuming, defeated but refusing to back down. I knew right then and there that she wasn't done yet. She might have lost this round, but people like Karen, they never quit that easily. And something told me that her next move was going to be even worse. The tow truck driver gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white as he tried to figure out his next move. He had already unhooked my car, but the weight of the situation was pressing down on him like a vice. Karen, standing just a few feet away, was still fuming, her lips pursed so tightly they were almost white. Why are you just standing there? She snapped at the driver. I hired you for a job, and you're going to do it. The driver swallowed hard. He was a big guy, built like someone who had spent years hauling vehicles and dealing with tough situations, but right now, he looked like he wanted to be anywhere but here. Ma'am, he started, choosing his words carefully. I don't think I can go through with this tow. He gestured toward the security officer, still standing beside me, his official badge catching the sunlight. This is government property. I could get into some serious trouble. Karen scoffed. Oh, please. It's just a car. We tow cars all the time. If we start making exceptions, what's the point of having rules? She jabbed a finger at the tow truck. You have a contract with the HOA. That means you answer to us, not some random guy in a suit. The driver rubbed his face, letting out a long breath. Listen, lady, he muttered, now clearly annoyed. This isn't just an HOA thing. If I take this car, I could lose my job. I could get sued. Hell, I could even get arrested if the government decides to make an issue out of it. Karen crossed her arms. That's ridiculous. I'll make sure the HOA backs you up. The security officer finally stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. Sir, he said, addressing the driver directly. If you continue with this tow, the embassy will immediately escalate this matter to federal authorities. Do you understand what that means? The driver nodded quickly. Yeah, I get it. He shot Karen an apologetic glance. Look, I can't do it. I just can't. Karen's expression twisted into something ugly. This is unbelievable. You're seriously backing out after everything we discussed? You will never work with this HOA again. The driver looked relieved, more than anything. You know what? He muttered. That's just fine. I watched as Karen's rage boiled over. She was spiraling, but she wasn't giving up yet. I could see the gears in her head turning, trying to find a way to regain control. Fine, she spat. If you won't tow it, then I'll get the police involved. She pulled out her phone, scrolling furiously. I'm calling the county office. We'll see how much your diplomatic nonsense holds up when actual law enforcement gets involved. The security officer chuckled under his breath. By all means, he said, gesturing toward her phone. Go ahead. I'd love to see how they react when they find out you're trying to tow a federally protected vehicle. Karen hesitated, her finger hovering over the dial button. For the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt. I took a step closer, deciding to twist the knife just a little. Let me save you the trouble, Karen. If you call the police, the first thing they'll do is ask why a civilian HOA board member is trying to override federal law. And when they find out, they won't be coming here to arrest me. I tilted my head. They'll be coming for you. Karen's jaw clenched so hard I thought her teeth might crack. Langley, the HOA president, finally decided he'd had enough. He turned to Karen, his voice now low and dangerous. Karen, stop. Karen whipped around. Excuse me. Langley stepped closer, his face tight with frustration. I mean it. You are this close to turning a simple HOA issue into a federal nightmare. I am not letting you take us down with you. Karen gawked at him. You're taking his side? Langley sighed heavily. Karen, there is no side here. There is the law, and then there's you being stubborn. He turned to me, then to the security officer. Can we consider this matter resolved before it gets any worse? The security officer gave a slight nod. As long as there are no further attempts to interfere with this vehicle, the embassy is willing to let this slide. Karen's face turned a shade of red I didn't know was possible. She looked like she wanted to scream, but she also knew she was cornered. I smiled. That sounds reasonable to me. The tow truck driver, now seeing his official exit, wasted no time climbing back into his truck. With a loud hiss of hydraulics, he put it in reverse and started rolling out of the neighborhood, clearly done with this mess. Karen, however, wasn't finished. She turned back to me, her voice now low and venomous. You think this is over? She hissed. You think you can just waltz around this neighborhood acting like you're above the rules? I kept my expression neutral. Karen, I don't think I'm above the rules. But I do think I'm above whatever power trip you're on. Her eyes narrowed. You'll regret this, she muttered before spinning on her heel and storming off. Langley just stood there watching her go, rubbing his face like a man who had made a series of terrible life choices. Well, he muttered, looking at me with an exhausted expression, that was a disaster. I chuckled. Yeah, for her. Langley sighed. Listen, I'll talk to the rest of the HOA board. We'll make sure there's no more nonsense over your car. He hesitated, then added, but I'd keep an eye on Karen. She doesn't take losing very well. I already knew that. People like Karen, they don't stop. Which meant this wasn't over yet. Karen stormed off, her heels clicking aggressively against the pavement as she disappeared toward her house. The tension in the air hadn't settled yet, but something had undeniably shifted. The power she had been so sure she wielded was slipping through her fingers, and she knew it. Langley, the HOA president, let out a heavy sigh, rubbing his temples as if he had aged 10 years in the last 10 minutes. Well, he muttered, turning toward me, I sincerely hope this is the last time we have to deal with something like this. The embassy security officer crossed his arms. That depends, he said coolly. As long as there are no further attempts to interfere with this vehicle, we can consider this incident closed. His words were professional, but the message was clear. This was a warning. Langley nodded quickly. Understood. Then he turned to me, looking more exasperated than angry. Listen, I know Karen oversteps sometimes, but she's been on the board for years. I held up a hand. Langley, don't try to justify this, I said, my tone calm but firm. She knowingly ignored federal law, tried to have my car towed illegally, and when that failed, she doubled down. This isn't an overstep. It's a liability. Langley winced. He knew I was right. Before he could respond, we heard the sound of a door slamming open. Karen was back, and she wasn't alone. Following close behind her was a furious-looking woman in a pantsuit, clutching a leather folder like it was a weapon. I recognized her immediately, Cynthia Morales, the HOA's legal counsel. Karen was practically vibrating with rage as she pointed a finger at me. I told you, she screeched. I told you I was going to handle this the right way. Cynthia approached quickly, shooting Karen a look of barely concealed annoyance. It was clear she wasn't happy about being dragged into this. Mr. Langley, she said, her voice smooth but firm. Would you mind explaining what exactly is going on here? Langley looked like he wanted to disappear. There was a, misunderstanding regarding a tow order that. Cynthia cut him off with a sharp sigh. Karen called me in the middle of a meeting, ranting about rogue diplomats and special treatment. I left my office for this, so someone better start making sense. Karen seized her chance. This resident has been ignoring our rules for months, she snapped, her face red with fury. We tried to tow their vehicle, but then they started throwing around government nonsense to get out of it. Cynthia turned to me, her expression unreadable. Your vehicle has diplomatic plates? I nodded. Yes. She glanced at the security officer. And you're confirming that this vehicle falls under diplomatic immunity? The officer nodded once. It does. Cynthia exhaled slowly, closing her eyes for a brief second, like she was already regretting her life choices. Karen, she said, her tone dangerously measured. Did you know about the diplomatic plates before you called for the tow? Karen faltered for half a second, but she wasn't going down without a fight. I mean, sure, I noticed them, but that doesn't mean they should get to ignore our policies. Cynthia's expression darkened. Karen, she said again, this time with zero patience. Please tell me you did not order the removal of a legally protected vehicle. Karen huffed. It's just a car. HOA rules should come first. Cynthia let out a sharp breath. Oh my God. Langley buried his face in his hands. The security officer remained stone-faced, but I could tell he was enjoying every second of this. Cynthia turned back to me, ignoring Karen completely now. Sir, on behalf of the HOA, I sincerely apologize for this massive overstep. Karen whipped around. Excuse me. Cynthia continued, not even acknowledging Karen's outburst. This will not happen again. If you experience any further issues with this HOA, please contact me directly. She pulled out a business card and handed it to me. Karen was shaking with rage. You can't just apologize to him. What about the rules? What about? Cynthia slowly turned toward Karen. Karen, she said, her tone ice cold. Do you have any idea what you've done? Karen blinked. Cynthia didn't give her a chance. You put this HOA at severe legal risk. If this had escalated further, we could be facing serious repercussions. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Cynthia turned to Langley. We need an emergency board meeting tonight. Langley looked at her, then at Karen, then at me. Yeah, he muttered. Yeah, we do. Karen froze. Wait, hold on. Why do we need a meeting? Cynthia tucked her folder under her arm. Because your actions today could have cost the HOA thousands of dollars in legal fees alone. Because you, acting on your own authority, nearly created a federal incident. And because we need to discuss whether or not you should remain on this board at all. Karen's face drained of color. You can't be serious. Langley sighed. Karen, this is a disaster. We can't just pretend this didn't happen. Karen's hands balled into fists. I have dedicated years to making sure this community is run properly, and now you're turning against me? Cynthia stared her down. Karen, you did this to yourself. For the first time since this had all started, Karen looked afraid. She knew. She knew that her worst nightmare was coming true. She was losing control. Langley turned to me. I promise you, this will be handled. I nodded, satisfied. That's all I asked. Karen didn't say another word as Cynthia practically dragged her away, but I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. That night, the emergency HOA board meeting took place, and for the first time in years, Karen was not in control. She sat at the long conference table in the community center, her face twisted into a permanent scowl as the rest of the board members whispered among themselves. The tension in the air was suffocating. Even Langley, who had always been careful not to make waves, looked like he was one bad decision away from snapping. Cynthia Morales, the HOA legal counsel, stood at the front of the room, flipping through a neatly organized folder. Let's get to the heart of the matter, she began, her voice sharp and direct. Karen, your attempted illegal tow today has put this HOA at risk for serious legal repercussions. Karen scoffed loudly, arms crossed. Oh, give me a break. This is being blown way out of proportion. Cynthia's lips pressed into a thin line. Let me be very clear, she said slowly. If that tow truck had actually taken that vehicle, the embassy would have immediately filed a formal complaint with the State Department. That could have led to investigations, lawsuits, and fines. And do you know who would have been responsible for all of that? Karen shifted uncomfortably. Cynthia didn't wait for an answer. You, Karen. Your name is the one on the tow order. You personally authorized it. If this had escalated further, you would be facing legal consequences. The murmurs around the table grew louder. The other board members were visibly uneasy, exchanging nervous glances. They knew Cynthia was right. Langley sighed, looking more exhausted than ever. Karen, we've had our issues before, but this is too much. You acted without consulting anyone, and now we're all paying the price. Karen's jaw tightened. So what? She snapped. We just let some random guy park wherever he wants because he has special plates? That's not fair to the rest of the neighborhood. Cynthia set her folder down with a loud thud. Fair? Karen, this isn't about fairness. This is about the law. You don't get to override federal regulations because you think someone shouldn't be special. She shook her head. Your personal opinions don't matter here. Karen's face turned an angry shade of red. So what now? She spat. You're going to kick me out because I actually tried to do my job? Langley exhaled sharply. Karen, this isn't about your job anymore. Silence fell over the room. Finally, one of the other board members, a woman named Deborah, cleared her throat. I think it's time we vote, she said hesitantly, on whether Karen should remain on the board. Karen's eyes widened. You can't be serious. Deborah folded her hands on the table. Karen, this isn't the first time you've gone too far. You've been pushing people around for years, but this could have led to a lawsuit against all of us. Another board member, Greg, nodded. And we can't afford that. Karen shot out of her chair. This is insane. I've done more for this community than anyone else in this room. Langley held up a hand. Karen, sit down. His voice was firm. Karen clenched her fists, but after a few seconds, she reluctantly sat back down. Langley looked around the table. All right, let's vote. The vote was quick and brutal, 5-1. Karen was officially removed from the HOA board. Her mouth fell open. You traitors, she hissed, looking around the room like a wild animal backed into a corner. I built this HOA. I made it what it is. Langley stood, pushing his chair back. Karen, you need to leave. Her hands trembled as she grabbed her purse, knocking over her water bottle in the process. This isn't over, she snarled, her voice dripping with venom. I'll make sure you all regret this. And with that, she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. A long silence followed. Deborah let out a breath she had been holding. Well, that was long overdue. The others nodded in agreement. Cynthia gathered her things. I'll notify the necessary parties that Karen is no longer in a leadership position. Hopefully, this will put an end to the ridiculous drama. Langley looked over at me. I meant what I said earlier. This won't happen again. I nodded, glad to hear it. But even as the meeting wrapped up, I knew one thing for sure. Karen wasn't going to let this go. And I was right. The aftermath of Karen's public meltdown unfolded quickly. The next morning, the neighborhood Facebook group was on fire. Karen had posted a full-blown rant accusing the HOA board of corruption, discrimination, and betrayal. She claimed she was unjustly removed and that she was considering legal action. The replies were brutal. Karen, you literally almost got the HOA sued. I think I speak for all of us when I say good riddance. Lady, you're lucky you're not in jail. Then, to make things even worse for her, someone posted a video, a security cam recording of her screaming at the tow truck driver, demanding he break the law. It went viral. Neighbors shared it. Other HOA members laughed about it. Karen disappeared from the group. The final blow, Karen's exit, came a few weeks later. A moving truck pulled up in front of Karen's house. I watched from my driveway as movers hauled out furniture. A part of me wondered if she was moving by choice or if the HOA had forced her out quietly. Either way, it didn't matter. Karen, the woman who had spent years ruling over the HOA with an iron fist, was gone. The sweetest victory arrived a few days later. I got a letter from the HOA, an apology signed by Langley and the remaining board members. They also confirmed in writing that my car was never to be targeted again. I smiled, folded up the letter, and tucked it away. Justice had been served, and Karen, she was nothing more than a bad memory. The sun was setting over the neighborhood, casting a golden glow on the now Karen-free streets. It had been a few weeks since her unceremonious exit, and the change was palpable. The HOA meetings, once hostage negotiations led by Karen, were suddenly productive and calm. Neighbors who had previously been afraid to speak up were now voicing concerns freely, without fear of retaliation. The tyrant was gone, and the community was thriving. I had spent the last few days enjoying the newfound peace. No nasty emails, no threats about imaginary HOA violations, no Karen lurking around searching for her next victim. It was almost surreal. But what truly cemented the victory was Karen's final humiliation, the lawsuit that never was. After her public meltdown and embarrassing HOA expulsion, Karen had one last trick up her sleeve. She attempted to file a lawsuit against the HOA for unjust removal and discrimination. It was, to put it bluntly, laughable. For starters, the board had voted her out legally. They had documented proof of her misconduct, not to mention video evidence of her trying to illegally tow a diplomatic vehicle. Her case never even made it to court. The HOA's attorney shut it down so fast that Karen ended up with legal fees she couldn't afford. Word spread fast. The woman who had spent years bullying her way through the HOA was now powerless, broke, and completely humiliated. To mark the occasion, a few neighbors threw a block party. It wasn't officially about Karen, of course, that would be petty. But the timing was suspiciously perfect. There were grilled burgers, cold drinks, and a collective sense of relief that things were finally normal again. Langley, now a much more tolerable HOA president, approached me with a drink in hand. Well, he said, shaking his head, I can't say I expected things to go down like that. I smirked. Really? Because the moment she doubled down on that tow truck, I knew she was going to crash and burn. Langley chuckled. Fair point. He took a sip, glancing around at the Karen-free neighborhood. I have to admit, we should have done this a long time ago. I raised my drink. Better late than never. We clinked our glasses, a silent agreement that the HOA was officially free from tyranny. What happened to Karen? She disappeared. No one knew where she went, and honestly, no one cared. Her house had sold fast, probably because she had priced it low in a hurry to leave. There were rumors, of course. Some said she moved to another HOA community, God help them. Others claimed she had gone to live with a relative out of state. One particularly hilarious theory suggested she was now working at a DMV office, inflicting new bureaucratic misery upon the world. Wherever she ended up, one thing was certain. Karen was never coming back. The sweetest revenge was doing absolutely nothing. There's a saying that goes, living well is the best revenge, and I found that to be 100% true. Every morning, I walked outside, looked at my perfectly parked car, and sipped my coffee in absolute peace. No passive-aggressive notes, no threats of fines, no power-tripping HOA tyrants. Just quiet, and occasionally the sound of birds chirping. Pure bliss. At the end of the day, Karen was a classic HOA tyrant. She believed rules only applied when she was the one enforcing them, and she never expected to face real consequences. But she did, and honestly, it was glorious. Now, I have a question for you. Have you ever had to deal with an HOA Karen? Drop your worst HOA horror stories in the comments. Let's compare notes on who had it worse. Oh, and if you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like the video so more people can see it, subscribe for more wild HOA drama, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. Until next time, stay drama-free, or at least make sure you're on the winning side.